All right, this is Citizen Health Talk number 19, Genomics, Microbiomics, and Personalized Medicine. And really just going to have a roundtable discussion about what I just mentioned and everybody's experiences with it and previous experiences and what you want moving forward with this, and really just kind of have a general discussion. I want to start off by asking everyone who has had a genetic test done, whether that's just a 23andMe test, ancestry, or full genome sequence. Anybody?
I have.
All
Yep.
right. So, kind of curious, 23andMe or what? Hey, Nabil,
Hello, everybody.
everybody's experience with
Um,
23andMe?
I didn't do 23andMe, but I had pharmacogenic testing done through GeneSight for analgesics.
Okay.
And then I also participated in University of Michigan they have a project they're doing. It's called Genes for Good. You do enough surveys and then they'll send you a saliva kit. Then initially you get like your ancestry data, but after that, then you're eligible to get your raw data, and then you can actually process it through whatever you want. So I processed my raw data through Prometheus and also through, there's another one that I processed it through, but I've been able to get it and use it however I want it.
Okay. I think that's probably the common relationship with genetics right now, as people kind of go in that route. A full genome sequence has been very expensive in the past. And something that really just excited me was when on Black Friday, on this recent Black Friday, I got this in the mail. I see it from Dante Labs. And this is a test. It's a full genome sequence. And it
I
only
can
costs,
tell you about that. I'm actually working, so I'm part of Dazzle for Rare. And they actually we're starting to work with Dante Labs. One of the gals is going to go tour. I think they're opening a second lab in Italy, I want to say. But we've been working close with Dante Labs, and they've been lowering the price of the whole exome sequencing.
yeah, I'd like to talk with them too, because that's something that I see us later on potentially partnering with a genetics company, and we can get into that later. But I definitely like what Dante is doing. They're leading the charge along with Veritas Genetics and a couple other companies to really drive the price down. And I don't know if I mentioned, but it was $199, and for the same test a decade ago was $10 million. So that was basically impossible for 99.9% of Americans. But now it's getting to that point where, I mean, $100 next year, year after that, and $50. The price to sequence the genome, the cost is falling. It's falling quicker than Moore's law is progressing. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen when we all have our genetic data at our disposal, whatever we want to do with it. And there could be good or bad things that happen from it. And that's when I hopped in earlier. That conversation sounded like that's what y'all are talking about, the good and the bad things. But now what we can do currently, you can run your raw data through a variety of sites to tell you numerous things. There's one company called Helix. They have a marketplace where you can get sequenced by Helix or bring your own data and actually get reports on nutrition, your ancestry, just going down the list, like what type of athletic abilities you have, and a wide variety of things. It's interesting to see all of this, and I've done quite a bit of that, and majority of it is correct for me. Some of it's kind of, it's not exactly right, or it's close. But when you really get down into it, um, Kim, I think you said, was it Prometheus? And there's another one that I was going to demo off here. I found Livewello and CodeGen to be codegen.eu to be the best.
Yeah,
CodeGen,
I'm looking. I think Genome App is the other one that I was thinking of.
yeah, I'm gonna post them here. Now that's the one that's free right here, and I found this to be probably the more thorough than the others. But Live Well was also pretty solid. Which one did you say, Gene? What was it?
There's an app. It's called Genome App, and you can purchase like certain segments of the app, but it'll process your raw data, even if so. And now they've updated it enough so now it is catching like the SNPs, where before it wasn't. And so sometimes there's errors with it, because especially like with me pulling in the data from the Genes for Good, that is formatted slightly different than the raw data from 23andMe. So sometimes there will be errors with it, but the errors will show up and it'll just say, you know, maybe a false positive or something like that. But a lot of it's been really accurate.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, it's confusing if you don't know what this is. I mean, these specific genetic variants, and there's a lot of stuff that's scary as well. And I think that's one big problem now is releasing or having this data available to the general person when they start seeing that they have a 1.9 times increased risk for multiple sclerosis or 3x higher risk. That's me, actually. I'm reading this. It's kind of scary when you see that. And, you know, what do you do with that? Well, some people, not with that, but some people cut off their breasts when they see bad reports from their genetics. You know, you can be drastic. You can take drastic measures to do things, or you can start being proactive. Maybe change your diet, change your exercise routine, maybe try to change up your medication or something like that. The idea here is now that we have data to precise data to act on now, instead of this shot in the dark type approach, throw something on the wall, see what sticks. We can start precise with our medication and our treatments. So one thing I wanted to show off, and for all of you who haven't seen something like this, this is actually my report. I'm going to share my screen just so you can get a general idea of what's out there now and, you know, what we can build on in the future. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, this is my report. So I uploaded my raw 23andMe data for this. And here you should be able to see that, right?
I don't think we see your screen.
Yeah, I need to click the share button. That would help. All right. Now, for some reason, that definitely didn't highlight my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I got 4 of them. So which one? The one here that has the actual, what I just highlighted? Yeah. Can you see that something I just highlighted?
Yeah.
Okay, because usually Zoom highlights the screen when I share it, but it's not doing that right now. That's odd. So yeah, here, this is what you see. I just ran my raw 23andMe data through this, and you can see things that I have a higher risk for. And there's a comment feature here where people are commenting in saying, you know what, it says this for me too, and it is right or it is wrong. And you can start drilling down the accuracy of this a little more. And that's the one I was referencing there. So there's a lot you can start to see and gain some insight into. I mean, I could just scroll on and on. There's hundreds of these. So let's just go to specific pharmacogenomics. And this is where I think it has an immediate use case. For a lot of drugs, it's kind of that rules of the third. You know, a third of people prescribe medication. It's not going to work. Drugs, they're just not going to respond to the drug. A third that it is going to work perfectly as intended, and a third of the people that are prescribed the drug are going to have adverse reactions. So having a genetic test and starting to look at particular drugs that could harm you and not take those drugs, I mean, that's a big step forward of knowing, or a big step forward in personalized medicine, is just not prescribing the drugs that could harm a patient. Then next step is finding the right drug for the patient, the right time, the right dose, which, like, that's a I think that's a game changer right there, in my opinion. And the physicians that listen to this now, it kind of just going to ask, how has genetics or pharmacogenomics ever played a role in your prescribing habits? And moving forward in the future, you see the promise of this. Do you see yourself relying more and more on this data to make the proper treatment decision? Anybody want to chime in on that? Matthew?
Well, I'll weigh in. So first of all, most of the new genetic technology we're seeing now is a 5 to 6 year technology. Most of the physicians that are in practice took their genetics training 20 years ago in medical school, way before this hit. So most of this stuff is going to be new to most physicians. Now, there are physicians that are going to be heavy users of genetics, and those are going to be oncologists, and there might be hematologists, perhaps certain pediatricians, but it really, there's a lack of understanding of what's out there right now. So, for example, the MS, 3 times the risk of MS report you showed, okay, what are you going to do with that? Who does that really help? And does that improve your health knowing that? And, I would say it'll probably buy you a referral to a neurologist to talk about it. That's what it's going to do. So I am very cautious with the eagerness to dive into these large data sets, because my sense is they're going to help companies, they're going to help employers, they're going to help the government, and they're going to help the insurance people. But I think they're not going to actually contribute to the health of individual patients until, except for select cases, like if you have a cancer or a tumor. So I think we're 30, 40 years away, and I think there's going to be, before it really impacts the health of individuals, with specific exceptions for use cases. Anyway, that's my opinion. If anyone else wants to add, but
I do think you're right, and a lot of this stuff, right here, like increased risk of schizophrenia. What am I going to do with that? Well, at least I can start pointing at something if I go crazy. But
do you have Croatian relatives or Croatian heritage?
I'm definitely from, where was it at? I forgot my ancestry. I'm definitely British, but I have some, it's all overlapped over there.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, you dig into this stuff, and it's really cool. Okay, you have the data out here, and it's getting better every day, because the more and more people contribute their data to these open data sets, and the more and more people that start commenting in these user comments. I think the user comments are going to be big, because you can start narrowing down these variants and say, okay, well, they're actually expressing themselves in this way because these people live on this continent, and these people on this continent just don't have this problem. And you start looking at more of the other factors that play in health, determinants of their health. So it's interesting to start seeing these comments, and this platform is not necessarily the best for user comments to start cultivating a community around these specific disorders. But this other one is, and I'll share this. This is Livewello, and they kind of display it out in a better way to understand. But Matthew, I do think that you're right, and it's hard to act on some of these results, but I do think the pharmacogenomics is going to play a big part just in medication. For instance, kind of got back to where I was saying, why prescribe this drug if you know that it's not going to work for the patient? It's really not going to treat the patient the way you think this drug is. So might have to give a different dosage, might have to try a different drug. I think that's the immediate use case. And probably the near term, 3 to 5 years, I think more and more treatments will rely on this. And they already are on with cancer drugs. But I think that's something that's really going to drive an impact is microbiomics. And we can get to that here in a second. I just kind of want to walk through some more of this, just so while I have this page.
Brennan, I was just going to mention with the pharmacogenics, with mine, we did the analgesic testing, and it came back. One of the medications I was on had a major gene medication interaction, and we actually had to take me off of it. So, I mean, that was something huge for us that we had no idea about. So that was very helpful for us.
Yeah, I think that, situations like that, who else is affected by that? Go across the world. I mean, America takes more prescription medication than any other country, and it's estimated that 100,000 people die each year from medication errors. That's a number of different things, but I do think that kind of running every prescription through your known genetic variants based on this particular drug, at least we can start eliminating some of the deaths that happen from this. I mean, somebody that is on 10, 15 different medications, there's a lot of deaths from just medication problems, interactions, and I mean, that just happens. And if we can eliminate that by a $100 test, I think that's big for a step forward in humanity. And it's getting better every day. It's getting cheaper and better. So you're going to start seeing more and more cases like you, Kimberly. I mean, right there, if you could spread the word and let people know, other people that are taking that same medications that are like you can save them the headache or the pain or whatever adverse reaction you were experiencing from that.
So I just want to add actually one thing about this. So my background is Middle Eastern and African, and my experience with all this genetic testing is that, for example, for heritage, it's obviously working, but for other things like traits, disease risks, and some interpretation of variants, my experience is either it's 50-50 or sometimes it's non-conclusive. And that's because most of I'm not sure about the whole research part, but I know that for a lot of the people I talk to that have a minority, that from minority pool, those tests are not working 100%. So I've been always, cherry picking the information from that. I have no clue about pharmacogenic. I have not tried it. I don't know if that actually is something absolute or also depends on the, your heritage.
Yeah, right now, all this data, if you think about it, it's growing now, but the data set we had to rely on was basically white, Caucasian males from America for the longest time. that was the pool of data we had. So all interpretations from that and all guidance from that was misguided, if you think about it. So now that we are bringing in people from all around the world and having a database of just vast amounts of different genetic data, that's when it starts becoming powerful. So we now can know that this particular demographic does not respond or responds differently to these drugs. And you can start just gaining more insight with more data. If you want more information, start feeding the machine more data. But this right here, I want to say out that like at lower levels of B12, and I will say when I'm feeling down and kind of tired and just wore out, B12 supplement does wonders for me. I mean, just have energy, focus, concentration. Really, B12, B6 supplement works great for me. And I've been experimenting with this for the past 2 years, so it's not all on my mind. Well, it is all in my mind, but it actually does. It works. So that right there, it's a simple use case, but it's something that I've acted on with my data. Let me see. There's a couple other ones that made a whole lot of sense. I won't dig through all of this. I just wanted to show everybody what this does look like if you do choose to get your 23andMe test or any other test. But I do know that this is pretty limited. Actually, they are adding more. Well, it's growing every single day. It seems like every time that I do log into this, there are more reports. So every day this is growing, and with Dante Labs, they give you a very comprehensive report Kimberly, I don't know if you've seen some of their reports, but it's very thorough.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of their reports, but I do know that they are very, very thorough.
Yeah, I'm actually sending all mine off tomorrow. So I think it takes about 10 weeks. So I'm interested to see how that works out. But I'm going to move on to the second part of this, microbiomics, or this is particularly gut health here. Kind of an analysis of what's in your gut, and this is biome. There's a few companies out there. I have a couple other kits over there from uBiome, and if you're trying to make a decision between uBiome and Biome, I've tried uBiome. I've tried 4 kits, and they all fail for whatever reason. So don't go with them. That's my recommendation. Try something else, but I haven't tried this yet. But this is supposedly one of the leading tests, and it's very nice. You open it up, and it's like you're opening up an Apple product or something. But it's really, you poop in a bag. So, or yeah, I think it's a bag. I still haven't opened it all the way up. But anyways, this analyzes all the bacteria in your gut. And I think, me personally, that's going to have a bigger impact on my health, is to figure out what I need to eat to change up certain things. Because if you really get down to it, a lot of your diseases are caused by inflammation. And a lot of the inflammation is caused by the food you eat or the food you don't eat. And I mean, there's been numerous studies that link mental health to your gut, and your brain is, connected to your gut, and what you eat makes you happy or sad. That's what it comes down to. And if it's that simple, then I want to start utilizing that. Start eating the things that make me happier, that produce more serotonin. Start eating things that could potentially burn more fat and help me gain more muscle. I mean, that's information that I need. And also, if you start looking at all these diets and these fads out there, and people spend hundreds of dollars a year or thousands of dollars a year on new diets that they're just testing out. They don't know if it's going to work. But now, with your microbiome test, you can know what what foods you will respond to based on what you're trying to do, and stop wasting money. If you know this particular high carb, low fat, or high fat diet is going to work or not work for you, then do it. Choose something that works for you. For instance, I've done the ketogenic diet. That's Dr. Ravi. That's who we're missing. I've done that a couple times, and I mean, it melts the fat off me. 7 days, I'll lose typically 7 pounds the first 7 days doing that. And I've tried experimenting with different ratios of fats and proteins, and adding in a few carbs. I've actually found that the more protein I get versus fats, it changes up my sleep patterns too. So, I mean, those things like that, that's information that is kind of trial and error for me now. But having information such as my gut health and my genetics, I can start making better decisions and stop wasting time and money doing something that doesn't work. So that's just my personal experience with stuff like this, and something that I'm trying to get out of it. I do know for a lot of people, when you start looking at the foods we eat, I think that's one of the biggest problems right now, in my opinion. It's just our diets in general as a country. I mean, I think obesity is probably, well, I looked at some stats yesterday in Mississippi, where I'm from, where we've always been leading obesity. But I think we're about 10th now. That's not a good thing. That means we're not getting better. It means other states are getting worse.
West Virginia, I think, is the worst right now.
Yeah. And I need to verify that stat, because I did look yesterday, and I think we're like 10th or 11th. About 70% of all Mississippians are overweight or obese. And that's what it was. It was overweight and obese. So it wasn't just obesity. But needless to say, that's an epidemic. It's kind of getting out of hand. And I do think that's a lot to do with our diets. And
so your comments about gut health and gut bacterial distribution, that is something that 3 years ago, I started hearing about it in conferences. And every time I go to a conference, I hear more and more about it, up to and including things like fecal transplants for weight loss, that type of thing.
Yep.
I think that is undiscovered country that probably is going to have significant benefit when we understand it. And for whatever reason, I feel a lot more comfortable with testing in that area than I do with genetic testing, since it seems to be more focused on that individual. So I think there's going to be some interesting stuff coming out on that. Matter of fact, I'm going to a conference in 3 weeks, and I might ask a question about that, where that is, because there'll be some experts in that area.
So, Brandon, this is Richard Sprague. I know a few things about the microbiome, and I actually have a presentation if you are interested.
I would love to see it.
Share the screen.
Absolutely.
Please talk away. You got the floor.
I'll show you some things here. So I first of all have to introduce myself and say that I am a rank amateur. I don't have any particular credentials in biology or in the genetics or anything like that. But guess what? Most people, the field is so new that even if you did have credentials from say 5 years ago, your PhD, it's pretty much useless now. Yeah. And but my background is in software. I worked for a long time at Apple and at Microsoft, and now I'm working with a bunch of startups. But for the last couple of years, I've been especially interested in the microbiome. And I'm going to show you just real quickly. I'm interested, actually, Brennan, you said you tried Ubiome and it failed 4 times, I guess, because so you sent in the kits and then they came back and said, sorry, try again?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Let me see. I'll log in and tell you exactly what those errors were. They just, basically, I had the full five test.
Oh, okay. You did the 5 kit?
And and 1 would work. My gut bacteria, that worked 1 out of the 4 times, but then I'd get like.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Well, so I've done now at this point over 600 microbiome tests from Ubiome and a bunch of others. I've done Biome. There's another really excellent company I recommend called Day 2. I've done obviously 23andMe, Helix, and every company that I can think of for all the different types of genetic testing. And since I've started doing this a couple years ago, hundreds of other people have sent me their results. And I've got, if you can see my screen now, let me, can people see what's coming on my screen? Am I sharing?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So why don't let's see how I do this here. I would like to show you some of my results, and then I'd like to get people's feedback and comments about some of the things I've learned. So I won't go through the standard discussion here. I think everybody on this call is probably familiar that microbes are all over the place, and that the human body is mostly microbes. And these microbes have been around forever, and much longer than there have been humans. And most of the microbes that are in and on your body are co-evolved with humans, found only on humans, and have been there since before there have been humans around. And so a natural question is, what are they all doing? In fact, actually, I started out being interested in genomics and did my 23andMe test. And like a lot of people on this call have noticed that there's very little that's actionable. I mean, most of the stuff you learn from a genetic test, in my opinion, you could have learned if you just asked your mother. So if you want to know what your ancestry is, ask your mother. If you want to know if you should quit smoking, ask your mother. If you want to know, your mother says eat more fruits and vegetables. Guess what? That's the best advice if you find out you have the Alzheimer's gene. Most of the things are, one of the things I found out, for example, is that I have a gene that makes me more susceptible to opioid addiction. Well, I'll have to remember not to use heroin. Just a lot of things like that. Lactose intolerance, you'll find a gene for that. Well, there's a much cheaper way to find out if you're lactose intolerant. Just go buy yourself a glass of milk and try and see what happens. And I found that way to be true all over the place. But with microbes, it's actually at least 10 times more genetic information is in and on you that's from microbes than it is from human DNA. And they're all doing things. And this chart here is actually kind of an interesting way to look at, I think it's interesting that in terms of the variety of life, humans are up here somewhere in the animals area. And in terms of relatedness of other microbes or of other organisms on Earth, we're more, all of these things like fungi and slime molds and these things are more closely related to us than this whole other branch of bacteria that are out here. And each of these are different from one another, and it's just a fantastically diverse set of life that are in and on everything. And and you find them all over the place. There are microbes that are in the sky that affect climate. There have been microbes found on the inside of nuclear power plants. There's some that apparently floated up to the space station. They're found underground. They're all over the place. And this is the kind of thing that science has only discovered in the last, say, decade. And it's only become possible now recently to be able to go and do the sequencing necessary to go find out just exactly how diverse and incredibly prolific these things are and what they're doing. And this is a very hot area of science right now, as people are discovering new microbes and the effects that they have on just about everything. Somebody mentioned about the effect of microbes on behavior, and that's another really fascinating thing. I like to use this example here of this is a study done at Stanford a few years ago about, you've probably all heard that you shouldn't let pregnant women near cat litter. Well, the reason is because there's a microbe called Toxoplasma gondii that actually can only reproduce inside the gut of a cat. And it does something to a mouse that ingests it, where it finds its way, and you can see this picture here of this is an MRI picture of after the mouse ingests this microbe, it ends up in the brain, and it makes the mouse unusually attracted to cat urine. And nothing else, not rabbit urine, not human urine, just cat urine. It suddenly becomes really interested in cat urine, which of course is a good way, if you're a mouse, a good way for you to get eaten by a cat, and thereby letting that microbe find its way inside the gut of a cat and reproduce there. And I think that's just a fascinating kind of an example of ways that microbes are probably controlling brains that we have no clue what's going on. And there are lots of pathogens that are already well understood or well known that they have some effect on the brain. You heard a few years ago about Zika, which is a virus that failed to affect brain because it caused these terrible brain pathologies in young babies that were born to mothers who had been infected by the virus. But that's just an example of a failure. So that microbe tried to get into the brain, but it couldn't quite succeed. It caused some kind of other problem, and that's why the baby died or had ended up with serious pathologies. Well, there are plenty of other viruses that probably make it through just fine, and they're probably living in your brain right now, and you don't even know it. And who knows? Maybe that's the reason that some people are more risk averse. Some people are more risk sensitive. Some people like to do like to be outside more. An example I like to point out is, for example, we've all heard of people who are OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, where they always feel like they've got to, everything's got to be clean. They've got to wash their hands all the time. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's because there's a microbe that's in their brain that's making them want to get rid of the competition. And, forcing the brain, telling the brain, you got to wash your hands so I can get rid of that other competition. And I can just have you all to myself. And when I've started thinking about all the consequences of this, is just mind-blowing of how much these microbes probably are doing that we're just only now beginning to just slightly start to understand. Another example is, did you know that 80% of the serotonin, a lot of people take melatonin pills if they're to avoid jet lag or to sleep better, 80% of that is actually in your gut. It's not in your brain. And one example that I ran into a few years ago, if you're having sleep problems, it's worth a try. Turns out that the microbe that makes serotonin is made by, it likes to eat resistant starch, a special kind of resistant starch that the human body can't digest. If you take a tablespoon or two of resistant starch, it will cause your microbes to multiply, the particular species that produces melatonin. And I've talked to many people who swear by this as a great way, a sleep aid. Take a little bit of potato starch before you go to sleep, and watch those microbes grow and produce all the serotonin and melatonin your body needs. It doesn't work for everybody. I found that a lot of people, in fact, when I get microbiome results from people, I can go check to see if they have that microbe. And every single case, when somebody says they don't have that microbe, when their results show they don't have that microbe, I found that those people have trouble sleeping. And sometimes it's also associated with depression and other things. Unfortunately, if you don't have any, I haven't found a good way to get it back. And which we'll talk about in another slide here. But I want to point out that microbes are everywhere, including all over your food. You probably eat as many microbes on your dinner table, just eating on salads and the food that you eat, et cetera, et cetera. You probably get as many as you would get if you took a probiotic pill. Some of those microbes and the foods that they live on are found in unexpected places. I didn't know this until I was looking into this, but 2 cups worth of coffee has about the same amount of fiber as a half cup of lentils, which is kind of interesting. So there's a lot of places where your microbes are found. I became interested in this example a few years ago. I read about a study that showed that this particular microbe is only found in Japanese guts. And it's a microbe that can metabolize seaweed. And somebody did a lab test and showed that Japanese people can get the full caloric and nutritional benefit of eating seaweed in a way that North Americans can't. And I thought this was interesting because I tested it in my own gut and found that I have it. So it's not true that no North American has it, because I have it. But I also, early in my life, spent a lot of time living in Japan. So it looks like this is an example of something where you can acquire it. So maybe if by the right living circumstances, you can change your microbiome, which again is really a game changer, because as we know, genomics, you're kind of stuck with whatever your parents gave you. But with your microbiome, it changes all the time. I won't go through all the examples here, but like there's evidence that, for example, your ability to be able to sense the taste of wine comes because of the unique type of microbes you have in your mouth and nose. I actually tested this. You can see how my microbiome changed over time during the different seasons. I didn't really find a good pattern there, but sort of interesting to look at. Here's an example of somebody who moved to the United States from Europe, and this is it's a special type of diagram that just shows the color intensity shows which particular microbe is doing what. And the only thing you have to look at in this chart is just notice that the thing on the left is the guy when he was living in Europe. The thing on the middle is when he moved, this is to California, and spent a month in California. You can see a radical shift there. And then he went on a pretty heavy duty probiotic for another 2 months after that. And you can't really see as big a difference between the middle one and the right-hand one as you do between the left one and the right one, which, evidence that just getting on a plane and traveling someplace can make a big difference in your microbiome. It changes over time. So the types of microbes that you have in your body when you're a baby, very different than what they are when you're on a solid food diet as an infant, and then moving up, through your adult life. And then the elderly also have another, distinctive type of microbiome. We're just learning about all those things. Mentioned about testing. These are just a few of the companies that will let you do it. The prices now are about, give or take $100 per test, which I think is just fantastic and lets you now, normal people, without even having a doctor's prescription or a doctor's intervention, you test your microbiome as much as you can afford. I made friends with some people in the lab and have been testing myself pretty much daily since 2014. I also spent much of that time tracking very precisely exactly what I ate, how much activity I had, how much sleep I had, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been running all kinds of computer algorithms against it to see what I can learn. Here's the one example. I'll show you this. Can people see the video this time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you see that? So it's moving around. So that shows how my microbiome changes day to day. So the green dots are healthy people, and I'm superimposing my own microbiome to show just from one day to the next. It kind of bounces around, but it's always in the healthy kind of territory. This is a special type of diagram that we use in bioinformatics to be able to show how different one particular microbiome sample is from another. The diagram on the right just shows how different the microbes in the gut are compared to the skin, compared to the nose, compared to the mouth. Let me just, actually I'll show this one really quickly. I have a teenage son who has a complexion problem. And I'm going to show you how the skin microbiome plays a role. So the dark dots are people who've tested their microbiomes, and they have acne on their face. The light green ones are people with eczema. You can see on the left side here, this is my own microbe, my skin microbiome. It kind of jumps around a little bit, but it's I have a fine. My complexion is fine, so it never shows as similar to people with acne or eczema. This is over here is my son. He had one test that was taken over here. again, kind of in the acne territory. One over here, kind of taken in the acne territory, and he's a teenager, has some skin problems. This is me again, and this is him after he went camping. So being out in the fresh air, not taking showers, eating camp food, that sort of stuff. And sure enough, his face cleared up, and we traced that to a change in his microbiome. This is the kind of thing that right now cosmetic companies and others are just racing to find out what the secret is and see if we can maybe manipulate the microbes on your skin to improve people's complexion. I've tested myself doing all kinds of things. This is, I wanted to see if kombucha changes the microbiome, and if so, how. And I couldn't find very many changes except for in this brand, this is GT's kombucha. It comes with they actually add this microbe to the drink, and the blue dots are days that I drank kombucha. The rest of the time here I've tested, but there is none of this microbe in there. And so you can see how just a couple days after starting to drink the kombucha every day, I could see this little bloom of this particular genus. And then I stopped drinking it, and the bloom kind of faded away. And now I haven't been taking it. I haven't been drinking it since then. And so there's, it kind of disappeared. So that's, and again, evidence that some of the microbes in something like kombucha do make it to the gut. I tested a probiotic pill. This is a real powerful probiotic pill. I actually don't believe in probiotics. I don't think that the pills help very much. And I know a lot of people swear by them, but I've yet to see somebody who can show me a before-after test with a microbiome test to show that it actually works. And here's the evidence that I have for myself. The red dots are days that I was taking the probiotic pill. The probiotic claims to have this microbe and that microbe in it. As you can see, I don't know, like maybe a little bit. But you can see that before taking it, it seems like it bounces a lot anyway. So I don't think the pill had very much effect at all. In the bottom diagram though, here you can see the blue line is where I was taking the probiotic pill. And that big, huge jump that happened over here, this is a month or two beforehand. Turns out that during this period, I was traveling to New Orleans and enjoying a lot of red beans and rice and that kind of food they eat down there. And that had a much bigger effect on the bifidobacterium levels than the pill itself. So I thought that was a big learning that I had, that the pills actually don't do much. The other one that I highly recommend if you want to change your microbiome, this has a clear effect, and that's kefir. There's a drink. I first got this idea from somebody who had, a doctor had suggested that he tried kefir for his gut issues. And so he did it. He was doing it for a couple of years, and he got tired of paying $3 a day to Trader Joe's to buy the kefir. So he decided to make it himself. It's super easy to make. And he said, like, within a day, it was just completely different. He was able to, his gut issues were totally healed. He was just wonderful. And he's been doing it ever since. And so I tried it. And sure enough, similarly, these are all the days before I had taken this. And I have data actually going back for years where I had none of these microbes in me at all, including this one, which is considered to be a healthy one. And within a day or two of taking the kefir, it started showing up in my microbiome, and it's been there ever since. Let's see here. I can go on and on and on, but I guess I'll let people ask questions. This is just kind of a summary of some of the ways that you can manipulate your microbiome by taking different kinds of food. Stay away from antibiotics as much as you possibly can. If you need them, of course, you should take them, but don't just take them because, just because. Make sure you've got a good reason for taking it. Spending time in the soil. A lot of the best microbes that affect human health come from the soil, and human beings are designed to interact a lot with good old dirt. And so certainly, especially for kids, you should not keep kids away from dirt. Similarly, also being around pets is another way to diversify and strengthen your microbiome. Spending time outdoors, there's lots of fermented foods that I can recommend, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's it. I'll stop here. Do people have questions or comments or anything else you'd like to discuss? I'm happy to tell you a lot more about the microbiome. Once I get started, I don't stop.
Yeah, this is exciting stuff. What changes have you noticed in your mood, your energy levels, Have you noticed?
Well, okay. So first of all, I have to point out I'm a reasonably healthy guy, and I'm I'm normal weight, and I've never eaten a bad diet. So I'm. It's not like I was trying to solve some kind of problem. Now that said, I feel like the paying attention to the microbiome has certainly helped me maintain my good health. But I also know a lot of other people who, by focusing on the microbiome, they're able to basically get some ideas for things that you can change, especially for people who've got some kind of intractable problem. A lot of people, as you know, have their chronic issues that they go to every doctor they can think of, and the doctor can't help them. And you talk to 5 doctors, you get 6 different suggested things, and they just go on and on like that forever. Or people with terminal diseases like cancer. The only thing you know for sure is that listen to what your doctor tells you, you're going to die. And we know that cancer and the microbiome are linked. Are there things you can do to affect that? We don't know, but every day people are doing more and more personal experiments like this. That's why I like the idea of what you call citizen health. Let people take this into their own hands, and you'll be surprised at the kinds of things they can learn.
Yeah, that's definitely the idea of really open sourcing this data and open source solutions to this. Citizen science approach to it. I love that aspect. And that's what we're trying to do with on our online community, hq.citizenhealth.io, is really cultivate these conversations, get people start talking about this and start experimenting out there and start comparing results and trying to find something that works. This is something, like you said, Matthew, I think it's something that we can actually take hold of and actually change stuff in our bodies, change different things that we are going, different treatments, different medications, different diets to really solve problems. And that's really the low-hanging fruit, I think, with everything we've talked about with genetics and microbiomics. So, Richard, I'm curious too. You say that the probiotics pills and drinks and stuff don't work that great. It's a big market.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see somebody prove me wrong. So I know that. Keep in mind that like there's also a psychosomatic element to this, and if you think something's going to work, a lot of times it'll kind of work. But I've not been able to find good evidence that taking a pill will actually change the microbiome.
I think there's some, and to back that up, I think some of the research on symbiotics, a combination of pre and probiotics for things like weight loss, you might be looking in randomized controlled trials at around 1 pound difference, which is not,
it's not enough. And you know what? And I'll tell you something. I have studied every single one of those peer-reviewed research studies that I can find. And now that I know a fair bit about how genomic testing happens for the microbiome and what sorts of compromises people make in the lab and the pressure to publish and like all the other things that go into this thing, there's just, and the science is so new right now that you'll find a new study that contradicts the old study every day that comes out. So if you read something that says that such and such microbe causes obesity, wait another week and some other study will prove that it doesn't. And it's just really hard to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's especially good for normal people to test and look at it yourself. And if you see, you can trust the genetic testing technology is reasonably robust. So when you get the results back, I think you can trust the results, but you can look at it and say, well, I saw a study that says such and such microbe helps or hurts. Well, I'm going to take this action, eating this kind of food, doing this kind of activity or whatever to try to increase or change that microbe. And I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to test beforehand and test afterwards and find out if it works for you. And I think that's a better approach to take a little bit of that into your own hands than just rely on something you read in an airport magazine.
I think that he hit on the key point that these studies have huge amounts of data, but do they actually do much in clinical practice? One thing I appreciate
clinical practice is a different world. Yep.
He's looking at this from he has software roots similar to most of you on here, and so he's taking a different approach. And I've always thought that the key is for the software people to get into health and the health people to get into software, somewhere meet in the middle. So, which is why I try to learn Python. But The other thing is, I think Richard would fit into the category of self-help hacker. I mean, he is looking deeply at his own health. I mean, he's also using these fairly big tools to look at his health. There's probably only 10 people in the country that probably have those type of data sets. So he's probably very, there's probably something to learn, but he is just one person. And, it'd be different if, say, people that were smokers who were obese that lived in another part of the country did the same things. Would they get the same results? And maybe not.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's, I think that's the key too, because we're all different. And so what works for one study may or may not work for you. And even if you look at, even when you look at the most robust randomized control trials out there, you'll always find that it's like 20% of the people in the trial just didn't respond or responded the opposite of what the effect was found. And if you're one of those people, that the results of that trial didn't mean a thing.
Well, Richard, I'd like to thank you. It was fascinating what you showed us. And to comment on the folks that are smoking and obese, maybe they're not interested in doing what you're doing. Obviously, they're not, at least at this point. Maybe we can help change some minds.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's got to be simple too. It's got to be, you can't show them charts and scatter plots, stuff like that. It just needs to be, you don't need to eat this. You need to eat this. You'll lose a little more weight if you eat this and not that. Simple, actionable advice. And we're getting there. We have to understand how to interpret the data first and how to act on that and then make the recommendations. So, I mean, we're in this pioneering phase. And Richard, I love this stuff. And also I want to ask you too, talk to you, give you a platform again, but what are you doing? I noticed personal science was your domain. You want to talk a little bit about your company and what you're doing there? And
we're still trying to, we're getting ready to launch, but, I encourage people to go check out the website, personalscience.com. And also, I'm interested in making it easy for people to share their raw data about health. And it's surprisingly difficult these days for a normal person who just wants to know a little bit more about other people like them and how they're, and how they're responding to a medication or how they're suffering. It's surprisingly difficult to get good information about that. One of the things that I noticed is there's plenty of forums. If you're suffering from some kind of chronic condition, there are plenty of forums for you to go and discuss with others about your problem. But there are very few forums where you can actually go and get the raw data that needed to go and do some kind of like serious analysis about it. And so that's what we're trying to do with personal science, is make it a little bit easier for people to do that.
Can you all hear me? This is Matthew.
You're muted.
Barely.
Can you all hear me? I'm sorry. Yeah, the information, and Dr. Richard, I would love to speak with you offline. I think what you just showed is just absolutely phenomenal. There's a lot of use that can be done for all this, and all the data that you showed is absolutely phenomenal. It's incredible. Here is my question regarding this stuff, and it's actually a concern. So my internist, by mandated protocol with Vanderbilt here in Nashville, is already doing precision testing and genetic testing. They have to for research purposes, and it's part of mandated protocol that he has to do. So I'm already aware of what he's doing, and I appreciate what he's trying to do, and I applaud what he's trying to do, and I trust him because I know that he's using it for good. What I don't trust is what the insurance companies are trying to do with it. The insurance companies are getting heavily involved with this information, and it really scares the daylights out of me because it scares the daylights out of me for if my internist was to somehow turn over my data to the insurance company. The insurance companies have already kicked me off the rolls once for having an intern. That happened in 2008. It took me a lot of work to get back on their rolls. So it scares me half to death if they were to get access to this type of information. Because right now, the insurance companies are still bound by Obamacare, but as you know, Obamacare is about to go the way of the dinosaur. This is what it's looking like right now. And if so, that means the insurance companies will have their hunting license back for denials. And so how do we keep all this great data that we need and definitely need, and especially the data that our providers need to help give us the great care that they can give us? How on earth do we keep it out of the evil insurance companies' hands?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I I think we're kind of running low on time here, but I'll just give my quick take on this thing is that that's a policy issue. I don't really have a strong, opinion or sense of, what to say or do about that. I think that one thing that is particularly appealing to me about the microbiome as opposed to genomics is that the microbiome changes every day. And that if you have a spotlight on my microbiome today, it won't do you much good a week from now, or if I change my diet, as opposed to genomics, which not only when you give up your genetic information and you upload it to some website, remember that you're not just uploading your own genetic information, you're uploading your grandchildren's genetic information. And if sometime between now and 100 years from now they find a genetic link between one of your genes and and somebody's idea of a politically correct thing that you should or should not think or do 100 years from now, your grandchildren could be denied a job because the laws can change and all kinds of things. And so I'm real careful about how I give up my genetic data, but I'm like very free and liberal with my microbiome. In fact, all my microbiome data, the stuff that you saw here, is all available online if you look at my GitHub.
Well, the solution is to do what we're trying to do at Citizen Health, and that's get insurance the hell out of the picture.
Do agree there.
Well, another quick thing I would add, by the way, is in terms of like privacy, it's true that privacy is a super important issue, and obviously the people on this in this conference call are aware of that and sensitive to it. But there's a small subset of people to whom maybe the way that the medical system protects privacy might have gone a little too far, and those are people with chronic conditions, so chronic or terminal conditions, and your ability to be able to share your data with another oncologist or a different person in another state is limited, partly because there's so much red tape you have to go through to be able to get that to pass that data around. And I'd like to see a little bit more flexibility in those sorts of laws. And I would also point out that in terms of if you're looking for a business or if you're looking for another take on a way to get into the healthcare market, I think that's an interesting one, because there is a subset of people who they're so desperate for help, they will give you whatever you want to know. If you want any kind of data that you can possibly give, they will happily give it to you because the current system just doesn't work for them.
I just want to comment on the insurance companies. I see the insurance companies, they're just financial companies. They're just going to manage risk. I have more of a, as you all may know, Amazon released some new software, and they have developed a third-party app which mines EHR data. So they're going to be going after the EHR market. I'm more concerned with that entry into data than I am with insurance companies, because they're going to have different agendas and motivations, and they will have so much to offer. I consider Amazon a big data AI company, not a consumer company. Same thing with Microsoft, same thing with even Apple. They have evolved, and they have these great technologies that are going to come with these huge ethical questions. I don't have any answers, because if you had someone like my brother who died of multiple myeloma, and there was a chance with big data we could have extended his life or prevented that, I would have been all for it. But personally, now, for me, relatively healthy, I don't necessarily want my data scattered to the wind. So I think there are some big challenges, but I'm less concerned with the insurance companies as I am with the big five. However, I'm ambivalent because I also know that these big five companies are probably going to solve problems too. So no good answers there. I still have my Amazon Prime account. So. Richard, do you live in the Pacific Northwest?
That's right. I'm in Seattle. Yeah.
Oh, I'm in Bellevue. Okay, I just saw.
Oh, you are. Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great. In fact, actually, I'm doing a talk tonight, if you can make it, downtown. The Quantified Self Users Group is getting together, and we're going to talk about the microbiome and also about, we got a couple people talking about continuous glucose monitoring, which is my new fad.
Oh, is it a Seattle meetup group?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. What's it called again? Let me just write that down.
Just look it up as Quantified Self. And I'm going to also, in the comments section here, if you follow me on Twitter, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me, or if you've got other questions, or if there's something else that you'd like to. And I'm pretty responsive on Twitter, and I'm very happy to talk further to anybody who'd like to talk. But if you look at my Twitter account right now, I've got the details of exactly how you can go to that event if you happen to be in the Seattle area tonight.
All right, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, once again, Richard, thanks for sharing. That's made me think a lot about kind of the direction I want to move forward, because I'm also that quantified self-hacker person. I actually got a whole DEXA scan yesterday, 3D body scan.
Oh, cool.
Trying to create a digital avatar of myself. I'll be the guinea pig.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And really have every piece of data I can possibly get on myself, and figure out how to replicate that for other users. So anybody that wants to have this thorough examination of themselves that they can act on, like having that data in front of them, and moving forward with that. And that's the direction we're going to be taking, part of citizen health, humanitive mainly. But it's a whole another conversation.
Yeah, great.
So everybody, it's been an hour. Try to keep it around that time. So I just want to thank everybody for joining today, and until next time. Every 2 weeks we have this, and I will stop recording here unless somebody has anything else to add. Anybody has any really good topic? It was a good conversation this time around, and this will be up on YouTube, if not today, tomorrow. So just let everybody know. So once again, everybody stop.
It's wonderful talking to everyone. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Good seeing everyone.
All right, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.